Welcome to Attachment Matters, a series of conversations between two moms who love to nerd out on the subject of attachment. We'll dive into what it is, what it isn't, what it relates to, what it can mean for parenting, and how it can help us explain the current state of things. Rose was introduced to Dr. Gordon Neufeld's attachment-based developmental model when her two sons were very young, and it has significantly shaped her life. She brings a depth of knowledge from the work of Dr. Gordon Neufeld, having taken a number of courses at the Neufeld Institute. This series offers her the opportunity to share insights from this model with parents who are trying to make sense of their trans-identified children.
As a mom of two teens and a former classroom educator, StoicMom has an intense interest in attachment and development. She's done some serious dabbling into the Neufeld bank of knowledge, but also has a knack for scanning the environment for frameworks to discover where they overlap and where they diverge. In her work supporting parents of trans-identified kids, she's committed to making sense of how we find ourselves grappling with things like gender identity and the other ways that our kids are struggling to find their place in this world. Both of us found ourselves entangled in the world of gender ideology, following very different routes to get here. We share a passion for the attachment framework as a way to understand and fulfill our roles and responsibilities as mothers in these oh so strange times.
In this episode, we talk about the primal attachment emotions to pay attention to as we move through this material. Rose links attachment to maturation and describes the first three stages of Neufeld's six-stage model of the development of attachment. The important concept of bridging gets defined, and hopefully we make clear that it's never too late to grow up. Okay.
I say we just start. Let's just
Yeah.
start.
Let's just start.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, and so we were, when you and I debriefed, we were thinking about the audience and
Mhm.
what this conversation, things this might bring up for them, emotions this might bring up for them. And it turns out that Neufeld this is included in the model. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
There is Neufeld terminology for this.
Yes. Yes, there is. There
Okay.
is. Yeah, so in our last episode, I know we just started to kind of give our backstories. We just started
Mhm.
to define, um, what is attachment when we're talking about it in the context of Dr. Neufeld's approach, as being this drive, this pursuit of closeness, of proximity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I wanted to just sort of set the stage for our conversation today, speaking to how for a parent starting to talk about this material, starting to delve into the ways that our own children may or may not have developed attachment, or maybe stuck, or maybe pursuing attachment, you know, from their peers or from online, or, in ways that we wish it wasn't going, you know, that can trigger a lot of really strong and primal
Mhm.
attachment emotions for us.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I just, I think that this will be a theme that we'll come back to a few times, certainly in this conversation today, but also over our series together as we continue these conversations over time. But just I wanted to say, if last episode or as we embark on this episode, if you start to feel a sense of alarm,
Mhm.
what did I do wrong? Have I done something wrong? Is my kid okay? Is my kid going to be okay? That is a total normal and expected response, um,
Mhm.
to delving into this material. If you start to feel this impulse to fix,
Hmm.
arguably that could be coming out of this primal emotion called frustration, which is when something that we value deeply is not working.
Mhm.
So That
Yeah.
could be something people experience as well
Oh,
as,
that impulse to fix. I
yes.
that just that phrase, having you name that, I can completely transport myself back to that being thrust into that impulse to fix that I do think hold on to your kids brought out in me.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
experienced was an impulse to fix. And that is certainly, I think, the experience so many moms in this circumstance are having. I think that describes it well. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll get into this more in a future episode, but what Neufeld would refer to this as is that we're facing separation. We're
Mm,
seeing the ways that um or they could be conscious, this could be conscious or even unconscious. It's not even necessarily in our consciousness. Um, but when we come face to face with separation, these are the primal emotions that are triggered. Alarm, frustration, which is that impulse to fix, and pursuit, which is, at least for me, can manifest in the seeking of information. But the
mm.
pursuit is about closing the gap. We're trying to close that gap.
And the gap between what? What gap are we trying to close?
Whatever separation we are facing. So, for a parent of a trans identified adolescent, child, a young adult, whatever age,
Mm-hmm.
that is a separation we are facing. Just there's no getting around it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as we delve into this material, so those primal emotions are going to be triggered, and we're going to be um, moved by them all the time.
Yeah, let's spend a little bit of time there on what that looks and feels like,
Yeah.
to be moved by your emotions. It's almost to be seized by them,
Mm.
possessed by them. Yes. Okay. And they kind of take control of us. And like you said, it can be conscious or unconscious, but I think this is often unconscious, that we don't recognize that we are really no longer operating from um, a critical place, right? Of discernment. We are being driven by our emotions. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, but I don't want to pathologize it. This is not another
Agreed.
thing to fix.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. But it's a thing to make conscious.
To come to see. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. To see
Yes.
how we're being moved by primal emotions. Yes.
I agree 100%. Let's not pathologize this.
Yeah. It is a place of, yeah, coming to have what Neufeld would call insight or seeing
Hmm.
kind of underneath what's going on for us. And I'll have much more to say about this as we go. Yeah.
I just want to, real quick, make a connection here because what I'm hearing, and I think about this often, I've written about this, is once we can make something conscious,
Mhm.
it gives us uh, more agency with it, right? Now we understand it and we can work with it. We can use it. We can use that information, do something different, right? This is the power of making something conscious, of naming something.
Yes.
Yet, like I'm also connecting this to that pursuit that moms get so caught up in, that if I understand this enough, if I do enough research and I have enough information and I understand this enough, I can change it. I can make it stop, right? I've got some control over it. And often what they learn, at least, moms um, with older kids, sometimes I think that's the lesson is how little control you have. Now, this doesn't mean we don't have influence, but it's the control that we've got to often learn to let go of. That's
Yeah.
often what we're learning.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and this is not this may be the first time we're touching upon this, but it will not be the last.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
will not be the last. I think, really my hope is to say, hey, as this conversation unfolds, if you start to feel alarmed,
Mm-hmm.
if you start to feel like, I got to get this right, I got to fix this, this isn't working,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't
Mm-hmm.
working in my relationship with my child, or that sense of pursuit, of really just grasping for whatever it may be. In my case, like many of your moms, it would be information.
Mm-hmm.
And, that is a huge pursuit of mine, that's triggered. So if you have those responses to this conversation, just um, instead of trying to fix those responses, I guess what I want to say is just note note them. Wow, I
Mm-hmm.
really felt moved by this content. I felt activated. I felt
Mm-hmm.
fear. I felt worry. I felt shame. I felt whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
it is to be expected. And like you're saying, we're bringing something to consciousness and we're going to be naming things today. And
Yes.
it's almost like there's no way through it but through it.
We were just talking about this in the community. Yes. The only way
Yeah.
out is through. And if I could also encourage, if you're experiencing these uh, emotions that come from this fear of separation, the alarm, what's first? Alarm, frustration,
Yeah.
pursuit? Is that kind of
Yeah.
how you?
Alarm, pursuit, and frustration.
Okay, so
What
not
Neufeld
necessarily an
definition.
okay.
No, just the three primal, what would be called
Okay.
primal separation emotions.
Primal separation emotions. Okay. So as these come up for you, yeah, being able to identify them. And then I would encourage too, like, I think it can be helpful to think of ourselves in parts. Like part of me is feeling alarm, part of me is feeling frustration. And and that can help us have a little bit of distance sometimes from those primal emotions that might
Mhm.
not be the best state to act in, out of
Mhm.
those primal emotions, and then maybe tap into the part of yourself that we all have, but can be hard to find sometimes, that is curious,
Yeah.
and compassionate and a little bit more removed. And then you can kind of tend to
Yeah.
those emotions and calm them a little bit as we continue the conversation and as you learn more. And
Yeah. And that is I mean, I couldn't agree more. I will also say that's kind of an advanced
mm,
ability.
sure.
You may
Hmm.
not find
Hmm.
yourself being able to do that. And so for me, I have been helped greatly for myself by even simplifying it further and just being like, wow, I am really upset, or I am really wound up, or I'm really I like the word activated, has helped
Hmm.
me. I might not know what emotion is moving me. I just
Hmm.
know I am in a place.
Hmm.
So I think for many of us, if not all of us, this is a new understanding, a new way of coming alongside ourselves. We might not have all the language right or accessible when we start. We might just say, wow, I'm really worked up.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And it's okay to be a beginner. Yeah. Rose, what do you do when you recognize that you're activated?
Well,
Like, how do you tend to yourself? Hmm.
like if I can recognize it,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
not a, can't take that for granted.
Hmm.
Um, uh, it's very hard because, especially when we're in these primal places, what often comes with that is what would be called a purity of emotion. It's hard to see a
Hmm.
mix. It's hard to see the parts. It's hard to see
Hmm.
on the one hand this, on the other hand that. Um, so it depends on the moment and it depends on my capacities.
Hmm.
But if I'm able to say, wow, I'm really worked up right now. I would just say that's kind of the first step. The goal being to develop a relationship to these reactions, to these emotions,
Yes.
with the tools of insight that we can gain,
Yes.
um,
Yeah. It can be
to
helpful to get some support in this.
or just
And
talk, yeah, yeah, talk to someone,
yeah.
your whether it's God, whether it's your
Uh-huh.
partner, your loved one, your husband, your wife, a friend, a trusted friend,
Hmm. Hmm.
just saying, wow, I was really activated, I was really upset, and getting it off your chest can help a lot.
Yeah. I guess one more thing I would say to this end is the rewards of developing that relationship are great. The rewards of developing that capacity
Hmm.
to recognize and name the emotion and create these relationships and maybe understand what the emotion is communicating to you. If we can understand emotions as information, we tend to judge them as good or bad. If it's uncomfortable, painful, we label it bad and then we want to push it away and not experience it. And that is we kind of rob ourselves of what we can become if we learn to recognize and develop the relationship. So, okay.
I agree. I agree
Yeah.
completely. And it's just a matter of like, we are where we are.
Hmm.
We're not going to have it get it right ever, probably,
Right.
but certainly not the first time we try.
In the words of Lisa Marciano, that I love so, so much, we are the projects of a lifetime.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And our relationships are rich ground for us to learn this about ourselves and
Yes.
to develop this capacity. I think this is
I think they're the only ground.
the only ground. I agree. I'm with you 100% on that. Yes. And one of those relationships is our relationship with ourselves.
Yep.
Hmm. Hmm. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Here we go. Hmm.
Yeah. So today I wanted to sort of take us through this what Neufeld would call the 6 stage model of the development of attachment. And last episode, we put a link in the show notes to a video where he walks through this in detail, and folks are absolutely invited to check that out. But that's sort of the basis for our conversation today.
I'm going to confess real quick
Yeah,
that
please.
I did watch this recently.
Yeah.
I had encountered this content before when I took the Neufeld parenting class, the beginner class, I think it was, and reviewing it even, and Rose knows this, created some of these emotions for me. I was certainly being activated and experiencing some of that alarm and frustration. So Rose talked me down, and here we are.
Yeah, well, I do too. I
Hmm.
Same thing happens to me. Maybe not as intensely as it would have a few years ago, but absolutely. I have similar responses. Fear,
Hmm. Hmm.
lots of
Hmm.
worry, a lot of things. So, but you know, really, I think where I want to start is almost backing up a step before we dive into the stages themselves. And again, really, what are we talking about when we're talking about what attachment is?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so for this, as we begin here, I just want to invite people to sort of set aside what you think you know
Hmm.
about even the idea of people growing up.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
Because attachment and maturation are deeply intertwined. Okay. It's almost as if one cannot happen without the other. And so this is again where alarm can kick in. Oh my gosh, is this going to happen for my kid? Did this happen for me? Did I do everything wrong? Okay.
Hmm.
So here we go. Okay.
Hmm.
um, so the idea is that where Dr. Neufeld has sort of set his, 40 years of work is putting these pieces together. Many different theorists, what he would call sort of the blind sages that picked out a piece of this but didn't see the full picture. What that is this idea that attachment in and of itself is not a given. It's not something we're automatically, we don't come in with this developed fully. That attachment itself carries a developmental process.
But we all come with the capacity to attach.
Capacity, right? So we have
Okay.
all these instincts, like a
Mm-hmm.
baby, going to latch at the breast, or cooing in response, or the play of eye contact and the grasping of a finger. We come in with, I think he has spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of attachment instincts,
Mm-hmm.
but that it is a developmental process that must unfold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how does that relate to growing up? Well, I think in our culture, we're immersed in this belief that everyone grows up.
Mm-hmm.
And from the Neufeld perspective, yes, everyone grows older, but not everyone grows up. And as we become a more and more peer-oriented culture,
Mm-hmm.
um, the number, I would argue, of people who actually mature, who actually quote unquote grow up, is less and less. And so he comes from this place, the developmental place of maturation being spontaneous, but not inevitable. And basically, what that means, and I can see from your face that you have a question or something you want to say. But I just want to say that
Mm-hmm.
basically, what that means is that we all have the potential to mature, just like we all have the capacity for attachment.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's something that maturation and attachment, it's not something that's taught. It's not something
Mm.
that's coerced.
Did you say it's not something that's coerced? Oh, thank you for saying that. Yes.
You're
Okay.
welcome. Were you going to say something else, though? Hop in here.
Well, my curiosity right now is, what does that mean? What does maturity look like? How do we know if somebody has grown up?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. And again, I'm like, I can sort of give a very drop of the ocean for today, and something that I do want to come back to in much more depth as we
Mm-hmm.
continue this series. But
Mm-hmm. Okay.
um, I'll say one of the key pieces of maturation is what I hear you speaking to often, which is the ability to integrate,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to have that full prefrontal cortex development. It is not a given that this happens to people. Some people live their entire lives without an integrated prefrontal cortex. Okay. Being able to say on the one hand and on the other hand at
Yeah.
the same time, being
The
able to be a
capacity for
separate individual.
ambivalence. Okay.
Yes. And to be able to be a separate individual
Mm-hmm.
while staying in relationship to others.
So the capacity for mixed feelings, is
Yes.
that okay?
Yes. The capacity to be separate while also being together.
Separate
This is
but
not a
together.
given.
Okay.
Okay, but we'll come
Oh
back to
yeah,
that.
so many things are
I'm
yeah.
sure. I know. So it kind of takes us back to this idea when I talk about the spontaneous but not inevitable. It takes us back to this um, analogy or idea of the gardener versus the sculptor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maturation is not sculpted, attachment is not sculpted. If the conditions are conducive, the plant will grow. So this also goes for humans. Our maturation is something that will unfold spontaneously,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Mm-hmm.
also has the potential not to, that it can get stuck, and we
Mm-hmm.
can grow older without growing up.
And what you're saying, and I would agree from my observations, is that so many of us are full grown but stuck
Correct.
somewhere in this maturation project process. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I want to link that back, and we'll get into this more further, but that both the maturation process and the unfolding of attachment, deeper and deeper attachment, are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so kind of the same thing goes for what we're going to talk about today, the Neufeld model of attachment, um, that it is something that develops over time, and can actually develop over the lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, ideally something that would unfold at its 6 stages in childhood, as he lays
Mm-hmm.
out in that video, but for many of us, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that it's ever too late.
Okay.
Um,
And I think there's a good deal of it that maybe just doesn't even happen until middle age.
yeah, or it can happen at a younger age, but then something gets stuck in adolescence, and we have got to come
Mm-hmm.
back to it again in middle age. Sometimes it is through
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
crisis
Yes,
or a conflict that are both our maturation and our attachments can unfold further. And I will speak to
actually,
that being something
yeah.
that I have certainly experienced in my own story.
Well, that's so interesting. I guess real quickly what I'm thinking of is because I've often wondered this, if conditions were ideal and we came out of childhood attached in the way that nature intended, if if that first half of adulthood would look different than it does, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe this sort of midlife development that Jung identified wouldn't look like it does had
Interesting.
we entered adulthood more maturely, if that makes sense. And it's just something that I've wondered, but I'll just I'll just throw that out there. We can continue.
Very
Go
interesting.
ahead.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many possibilities as um, you know, one thing that Neufeld will speak about is this idea that we look to normal, um,
Mhm.
as if that is our potential, and it's not.
Yeah, which is also that's like the premise of positive psychology. How do we get us all to this place of thriving rather than functioning? Hmm. Okay. Okay.
So so we go back to this analogy of the plant and the gardener,
Hmm.
and really looking, at this concept of attachment as something that the seed comes with the design for. And if the soil and the conditions are conducive, that design will unfold. Now, Neufeld's analogy with the plant is actually that attachment is the roots. So what that means for us is that often these parts are absolutely underneath
Hmm.
and unconscious. They're not visible per se. What is visible is the growth of the plant, right? And that maybe
Hmm.
we are speaking to that more as that maturation or that emergence process of someone fully developing as their own person. But what is underneath that is the deeper the better. The
Hmm.
deeper that attachment goes, the less superficial it stays, the more that plant is going to thrive and grow. Um,
The more securely rooted.
Correct. And the more deeply rooted. And we'll explain why as we
Okay.
talk about these 6 stages.
Okay.
So again, just like I spoke to with the maturation, spontaneous but not inevitable. What that means is that the design is there. If the conditions are conducive, it's not something that has to be taught or forced. It can't be, honestly.
Hmm.
Um, this is something that will unfold, but it is not guaranteed. And so
Hmm.
there's factors that are going to play into that, those deeper levels of attachment unfolding or not unfolding. And again, I just want to, we spoke to this in much depth already, so I'll just touch upon it again here. If you're feeling that alarm or that, um, oh my gosh, how can I fix what may have gone wrong with myself or my own child? We're just going to keep on talking about those emotions. We'll spend a lot more time with them in a future episode, but just for today, whatever may come up, let it be with you, as we continue. And I want to say here, it's never too late. It's never too late for maturation, and it's never too late for attachment, never too late. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
there are, I'm already feeling my tears coming.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I hope that I'll touch upon this as we get through these stages today, but I want any parent who's listening to this right now who may feel alienated or estranged from their child, whether adolescent, teenage, young adult, to know that I spent many years estranged from my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and we have healed our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I have matured.
Mm-hmm.
Took until now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in my mid 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to tell the parents out there whose hearts are broken
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that it's
Yeah,
not too late.
I appreciate
It's
that.
never too late. So let's talk about the 6 stages. So I think we've done a good job of sort of setting the stage here. So as you could watch in Dr. Neufeld's video, the first, what he would call that first stage of attachment, the most superficial, but obviously hugely important stage,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is attachment through the senses. So this pursuit of closeness, and again, this is a primal impulse. Before we go further, this is not rational. This is not accessed through the thinking brain. This is this is the primal brain, okay, the deepest part. Um, it's not something we're going to think, oh, I would like to. I am
Yeah.
thinking, I am feeling. It is just we are moved. It is primal,
In
okay?
fact, it's not even limited to humans, if
No,
I
it's
recall.
everybody, all
Okay,
mammals,
all
all
mammals
mammals.
have this level of attack. This is the
Yes, all
first
mammals.
stage.
Yes, and a few of them for some mammals, but yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So it's through the senses: sight, sound, taste, touch. I'm probably forgetting some, but it's very sensory, and it's not that we grow out of this.
Sight,
Yeah, yeah,
sound, taste,
hearing. Yep,
smell.
yep. So, yeah, things that we can palpably feel through our senses. And obviously, when we think about sort of for anyone who's in that, attachment parenting, quote unquote, world,
Hmm.
that's where this lives, right?
The
It's
baby bonding is that.
baby bonding, skin to skin contact, co-sleeping, all of that. I think, was informed by this level of understanding attachment,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
sensory closeness. Um, and even when we think about digital pursuit, whether it's myself as an adult or for
Hmm.
teenagers, whoever it may be, I do think some of that is driven by this sense to wanting to be together at the senses. If I can
Mm.
text you, if I can see you on chat, if I can see your pictures, on the feed, there
Hmm.
is some sense of
Hear your voice.
connection.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm in touch. I'm in, quote unquote, literally in touch
In touch. Okay.
through that digital platform. It's not the real thing, but it's a proxy, right? It's a
Hmm.
proxy, and I'm driven towards it because what Neufeld does talk about, what I have over time been able to identify in myself, is that some of these things, if we get a proxy, that's almost the real deal of a personal connection. It's almost that addictive quality. I'm going to go back again and again and again and again and again, and I'm never going to be satiated.
Okay. That's what I was. Okay. Yes. The
Okay.
satiation is the key
The personal, and only the
that keeps you
personal.
addicted, right? It's
Yes.
because you can't get satiated that you keep going for more.
The hits. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Exactly. And what he talks about is that it's only through that deeper, which we're going to as we talk,
Hmm.
personalized attachment that we're set free, from these instincts and this going back for more.
Okay.
So senses, we could spend a lot of time talking there, but I hope people kind of have the more or less idea of that as being the most superficial. But also just it's something that we'll take with us our whole lives,
Also the
right?
most primal.
The
though.
most primal.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So I'm not trying to dismiss it in any way by saying it's superficial. It's just imagine if you stay here your whole life and you
Mm-hmm.
have no other way of feeling together with another person. And if
Mm-hmm.
we talk about attachment being the deepest instinct of survival, we
Mm-hmm.
need it. We need it. So if we
Mm-hmm.
don't go deeper than the senses, we're almost trapped in that pursuit of being in touch. We can't be separate. We have to always be together in that kind of fusion state. Um,
Okay. Okay.
whether it's, seeking it through that digital touch or actual sight, sound, taste with another person.
Before we move on, then, can you quickly give me an idea of what would cause somebody to get stuck in this stage?
Well,
Right? Because
uh,
that's you can't avoid smelling and seeing and touching
right.
and tasting, right? That's gonna happen. So how does somebody get stuck here?
If they don't develop deeper.
Okay. It's the other stages that
Yeah, if
don't occur.
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's when you would get stuck. So
Okay.
let's move to the next stage, and we can always jump around and come back
Okay.
if
Hmm.
there's other questions about these earlier ones. So the next stage that would unfold is sameness.
Mm.
So the next, if you think about a 2-year-old who's developing language, this is the most
Hmm.
easy way to understand the sameness. It is all about imitation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that whatever 1.5, 2, wherever that child is developing language, it's taking the cues from those he or she is attached to develop language. Now, whenever I say this and think about this, what comes flooding in is all of the 2-year-olds who are on tablets all day. What are we
Hmm.
doing to these children who,
Hmm. My
no,
son
may not
calls them
have that,
iPad babies. Yes.
yeah, who
Hmm.
don't have, and oh, we're going to put educational content on to teach
Hmm.
them ABCs. That no, it is through our relationships.
I'm
And
already thinking of the addiction. They're not able to because it's depersonalized. Is that correct?
correct,
The
yeah,
screen is depersonalized. They're not going to be able to satiate their need for sameness. Okay.
exactly,
Mm,
exactly, exactly. So in in ideal conditions, this is the toddler or the 2-year-old is imitating his or her parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, other networks of attachment. Obviously, sometimes this is going to be happening in daycare or with siblings,
hmm.
but that is that the next drive to unfold is that drive to be the same as.
Hmm.
Now, what are the implications of that when we talk about social contagion?
Hmm.
Because if we are recognizing that attachment is developmental, and there's another whole layer to this that we're going to start to get into as we go to these next stages, there is also a vulnerability of rejection.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if we become defended against that vulnerability, we will retreat into these more superficial levels. And so, what I'm trying to say is a lot of our youth as
Hmm.
adolescents,
Hmm.
a lot of our adults are
Hmm.
still driven to find closeness through being the same.
And I'm thinking this is the second of six. We're only in the second phase here or stage.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, it's all about imitation.
Yeah.
This is what drives our language acquisition.
Mhm.
Is that because we need to communicate with those we're close to, like,
It's just
it's more
imitation.
to be like them. We want to
Yeah.
talk, we
Yeah.
want to acquire language so we can be the same as
Yeah.
those that we need to
Yeah.
attach to.
I don't even think it's that complex. I
Okay.
think it is that primal instinct to copy.
To copy. Okay.
And it's not conscious again. It's just, I see you, I'm oriented towards you. You are my
Mm-hmm.
compass point,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to repeat what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes,
And I,
survival. It's survival.
it's
Yes.
survival.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's survival.
You've survived this long. I need to do what you do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or I need to stay close to you so I survive. They are
Mm-hmm.
dependent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is why there's so much emotion around all of this. That's what keeps us on this pathway, right? That's
Yes.
embedded in the blueprint to keep us developing and maturing.
Survival. Yes,
Yeah.
at the
Okay.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's much more that could be said with the sameness, but we'll leave that. Well, I'm on the fence about telling a story or not, but I think let's keep going and I'll come back to my story.
Okay.
So the next layer, the third layer, would be belonging and loyalty. And this is at the 3-year-old, let's say the 3-year-old level. If things are actually going along this age. Now take this again, when I said throw out everything you know coming in here. When we I just this is a good when I say age and stage, we have been drilled by our culture and the pediatricians and the online mom groups and ages and stages. So this idea of this developmental model, when it came over, quote unquote, from Europe, the United States adapted it into an ages and stages model where it's almost like, okay, when my child is 1.5, this is what they're going to do.
Mm.
And when my
Mm-hmm.
child is 2, they're going to do this. And well, it doesn't work like that. I mean, a lot of things
Thank you.
might
Mm-hmm.
actually unfold chronologically at a certain age, but it's not guaranteed. And it's not like we're machines
Mm-hmm.
and we put in a program and click, click, click. It's just going to, this version 2.0 is released on March 25th when I turn 3 years old, and now I'm going to do these things. We're not machines.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be programmed like that. Um, so when I say at 3 years old, this is when this capacity is potential, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen always at 3 years old. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about this is not an age and stage model where we're saying this is for sure going to happen at these different ages.
Which is so important because along with that age and stage uh, mindset, I would imagine comes a lot of these primal emotions again. Oh, my kid's not doing this thing. And so we go into alarm and frustration, and then we have an impulse to fix if things don't look the way we think they're supposed to look. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. Yep. So with the third stage, belonging and loyalty, this next capacity is unfolding. So we've started at the senses. If things continue to unfold, then there's the sameness, that drive to imitate or copy, be the same as. Um, and then we unfold this ability to feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of loyalty. Now, sometimes, especially in our current culture, this can kind of get shamed or pathologized because part of what comes up is this drive to possess and to own,
Mm-hmm.
like my mommy,
Mm-hmm.
my this, my that, or to take sides. Um,
Tribalism.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, exactly. So whether we're talking about a young child who's starting to develop this capacity for attachment, I think for me, I felt very challenged by this because I sort of had this ideological or theoretical belief that, that possessiveness was bad or that ownership was bad,
Mm.
versus saying, oh, here is my young child who's now, this is great. They're starting to attach in this deeper way, or they're developing, this is
Mm-hmm.
normal, or
Mm-hmm.
this is part of healthy development, is to own and
Mm-hmm.
possess and take sides. Obviously what you're speaking to is when we get stuck
Yeah,
and this becomes the primary driver for adults
that
who
just
have
came to
not
mind. Yes. Okay.
matured out of it. It can
Mm.
cause a lot of major problems. Um, but
Okay. I guess what I'm wondering
Yeah.
now is if we're still feeling like or still have that drive to possess our adult children, we may be stuck here. Is that kind of the idea?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't
Okay.
know. I can't definitively say yes for sure, but it's a good question to ponder.
And I would also consider how much our culture almost encourages us to get stuck here. That that this is where we are culturally.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that could be said.
Hmm. Hmm.
The interesting, so I will probably come back to this, but in an, you know, let's say for my son, and you did ask a question, what can cause us to get stuck? Well, this might be a good time to just mention that for a highly sensitive child,
Mm. Hmm.
or the construct that Dr. Neufeld uses for the autistic spectrum, what many, in our dominant culture would call autistic spectrum, his construct for that is actually hypersensitivity.
Ah, okay. I would say that is mine as well.
And it can
Yes.
cover a wider gamut. You can actually have some gifted
Uh-huh.
children who would fall
Uh-huh.
in hypersensitive
Uh-huh.
spectrum, as well as some ADHD,
Well, and
even on the roots.
is it all right if we do just kind of pause
Mhm.
and support this idea a little bit or a
Yeah.
little bit that there are different frameworks that describe the same uh,
Phenomenon.
thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, that describe the same phenomenon. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't mean that one framework is wrong and the other one is right. It's just different ways to look at the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to then maybe determine which framework is most useful or helpful in your
Yeah.
particular situation.
Yeah.
And so, and I think there's even controversy as to whether autism is considered a pathology or not, but I think often it is. And so then we find ourselves again in that impulse to fix.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's why you said early on, let's let's be mindful of things that sound like we're pathologizing because
Mhm.
all of this is normal,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah. So,
there's, and that's not to say there aren't some kiddos who are much lower on the functioning
mhm.
scale when it comes to that spectrum,
Yes. And the
yeah.
reason why I bring it up right now is that, you know, for my son who is either right on that cusp of being highly sensitive versus hypersensitive, where the sensory gateway system of the brain is farther open.
Okay.
So the input is more overwhelming, and the
Uh-huh.
brain responds by kicking in defenses. The defenses that are kicked in that we see with some of, especially these, let's say, much um, much more severely autistic kids, are attachment defenses. So eye contact, this attachment
Mm-hmm.
through the senses becomes something that the children will reject. Not again
Mm-hmm.
consciously, but their defense system is kicked in to help protect from the sensory overwhelm, which makes the attachment unfolding so much more challenging. So I say this to give the context for just a brief story. When we talk about belonging and loyalty, when we became aware that for my older son, that these attachment defenses were there, we saw him doing more depersonalized attachment. We started to become more aware of these things. That's when we tried to start priming, is what the term that Dr. Neufeld uses. It's not a coercion, it's not a teaching, but it's like, how do I create some of these conditions more intentionally. So coming up with our kind of family cheer, trying to develop this sense of belonging as a family, loyalty as a family, just really trying to create those conditions that would allow more of that layer to unfold. Dressing, our, having matching clothing for sameness, or, coming up with these like songs or things that built us together as a family, for the belonging and loyalty, really trying to create those conditions, as best we could that would make it safe, to attach in those ways.
Okay.
So just to wrap up for now, this belonging and loyalty, just like the senses, just like the sameness, this is absolutely primal.
Okay.
Not rationalizing here. We're not going to get through to a child who is driven to belong and driven to be loyal through talking, through intellectualizing. Okay, it is something to be starting to say, where do I see my child or myself even being driven to belong, being
So this
driven
is
to
at
be
any
loyal
age.
at any age? All of this is at any age, all of
Okay.
it. Okay. And what we can take as almost like a tool for ourselves, and I think you speak to this a lot in your work, is we do not want to enter into antagonistic relationships
So
with our,
positioning.
we want to come alongside, we want to actually take the side of our child.
Yes.
So they can feel that we are loyal to them.
Yes. Yes.
As hard as that may be, while still saying no, while still having a boundary, while still how do we come alongside their experience in a way that they feel that we are on their side?
And that those two things can coexist, boundaries and I'm on your side.
Yeah. They
Yes.
have to feel it. We can say it till we are blue in the face. They have to feel it.
We could spend a lot of time here. Will we come back to this?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, or we can stay here.
So you're saying you can't intellectualize this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it
Let me
has to be a felt sense. Okay.
It has to
Yeah.
be felt. It has to land, so to speak. And this is the terrain of such frustration for a parent.
Yes.
Because it is often, especially if we already have a child who is perhaps not, who is being guided by another compass point, who may
They're
be more
trying to belong somewhere
peers,
else.
who are more, trying to be the same as, who have already sort of got, whether it's peer orientation or some other depersonalized drive, trying to get that sense to land is often not going to work. And so that's where our work is. It doesn't mean we give up.
Right.
I am not here to say give up. They need you. They need you,
Yeah.
whether or not it's
Yes.
working.
And I guess what I would add to that then is sometimes the work that needs to be done is your own maturation so that you can provide this for your child.
Correct.
Okay.
Totally agree.
Okay.
So I just want to tell a little story, and I know we had planned on going further, but we might want to just do these first three for today, and save the second three for our next episode.
Okay.
As we start to get into the next three, we start to become more vulnerable.
Mm,
These first three are about our way of seeking proximity with another,
mhm, mhm.
being in touch through the senses, being the same as I can say, I believe the same thing as you. I can kind of style my hair the same as you. I can, take the same side as you without needing you to do the same for me. Okay. Without needing you to give the same back to me.
Oh, okay, hold on. Help me understand who is who. I can do
So,
this. Are
so
you
if
talking
I'm
about?
if I'm talking about my developing attachment and
Mhm.
I'm seeking you. I'm wanting to, be close to
You're
you.
in pursuit.
Yeah, yes, I am, you know, the seeker and you are the provider or whatever it is. I'm my
So this isn't necessarily parent and child that we're talking about here. This is seeker and provider.
yeah, well, parent, it could be a parent and child for sure.
Yes, but not necessarily. That's not
Right. It could be
okay.
myself with my friend
Okay.
or
Okay.
your adolescent with their friend or an online chat group. Whoever it is that I'm seeking to be proximity with, that my attachment drive is seeking,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I can seek to be attached by the senses. I can seek sameness. I can seek loyalty and belonging without a ton of vulnerability. Once we get to these deeper stages, the vulnerability opens up.
And
And
I would
we'll
imagine once the vulnerability opens up, the the tendency to defend is going to come on strong.
correct, which is
Okay.
why many people stay here
Hmm. Hmm.
or
Hmm.
retreat back here
Mm.
once the wounds are deep enough.
Hmm.
And in terms of this intellect, I just want to give one story in terms of understanding this intellectual piece that I was speaking to. So, in the case of my own two very young sons, as people who are familiar with my story know, we had socially transitioned my older son at a very young age.
Hmm.
And then my younger son started to also say he was a girl.
Mm.
And
Sameness. Hmm.
oh, and it was so fortunately we already had
Some
this,
Neufeld background.
yes. And so we
Okay.
saw it so clearly.
Mm.
We
Mm. Hmm.
knew where it was coming from. And my older son, being highly or hypersensitive,
Hmm.
was a child who was very difficult to connect with, to land with. So my younger son locked into this sameness, this drive for sameness.
Hmm.
I am also a girl. I want to wear the quote unquote girl clothes. And, you know, but there was no talking him out of it.
Mm.
It was
Hmm.
so much deeper. It was almost untouchable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember one day, he had mostly let go of, it was right before we rolled back our social transition. So we were very aware of what was going on. We had basically come to the decision that we had clearly this was not about our older son being like a true trans. It was other factors at play for him, and we were gonna take the off ramp. We were right
Hmm.
on the cusp of doing that. But one day, my older son was outside with some neighbors, one of whom was a girl, his like quote unquote best girlfriend. And my younger son was wanting to go outside and play. And he insisted on wearing, the pink leggings. And there was something where there wasn't a pair of pink leggings available to him at that moment. And he literally fell on the ground screaming and crying.
Mm. In alarm and frustration and
And it
okay.
was the sameness. And
Hmm.
for again, I've said this in, some of the interviews that I've done. Um, for a parent who does not understand the deeper drive, you
Mm-hmm.
could very easily say, my son is in complete distress. He must be transgender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank God I understood what was going on. I had the
Mm-hmm.
insight and I
Mm-hmm.
could see, even if I couldn't touch it, even if I couldn't land at that level of primal instinct for him for sameness, at minimum, I could see what was going on and respond in a way that was not, at that superficial level.
Mm-hmm. Can you, so what did that look like? How did
Well,
you
for
respond? Mhm.
us, it looked like we had to, you know, roll back the social transition of our older son.
What about in that moment
In
when
that
he was
moment,
having the tantrum? Yes. What
in that
what
moment,
was your response in that moment?
yeah.
Just real quick, just because I
Mhm.
think, we can get activated when we see that behavior.
Oh, yeah.
And
Ooh,
and
yeah.
just for practical purposes, what does being on his side look like,
Mhm.
when your child is in that state? And I know most of my
Yeah.
parents, again, have older children, but that doesn't mean that they're not experiencing these
Extreme distress.
emotional explosions.
Mhm.
So how do
Mhm.
we communicate I'm on your side when
Yeah.
when the seeker, the right, like I'm wondering if we need some terms,
Yeah.
is in this heightened emotional state. What does that look like?
Yeah. I don't know if there's one perfect answer. I guess there's not, because his drive was for his older brother.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
not towards me.
Well, and that's what's happening, right? These teenagers' drive is
Yes.
toward their peer group.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so for it's not something you can fix in the moment. So maybe that's the
Hmm.
takeaway.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
don't focus on the incident. Don't focus on the tantrum, but you can see it.
Yeah,
It's a clue to you for your own insight. What is
about what's
underneath?
happening. Hmm.
What is underneath? And in that moment, sometimes it's about being there,
Hmm.
but the futility that you can't reach them.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's the long game. It is the long
Yeah.
game of, now that I have this insight, what do I have to do over the length of this journey, of the long term, to do what you're saying, to work the attachment, to work my
Hmm.
relationship,
Hmm.
to help my child come to rest.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I encourage often just having some guiding principles,
Mm,
and so yes, having the understanding of what's happening and how maybe little you can do right in this moment, but keeping in mind that idea of positioning, that you don't want to place yourself in opposition to your child,
correct.
because that is not facilitating or encouraging that sense of belonging and sameness, and I'm on your side, right? So
Right.
they need to always feel we're on their side.
Yeah. And how do we show that? It's like you have that big incident, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it can trigger, I mean, trust me, I had other moments where the sense of frustration, like this is not working, this, you know, just things that I falling apart, that I desperately wanted to work, and I they weren't working. And so I think, the best you can to not react out of that place of
Hmm.
frustration in that
Hmm.
incident, the
Hmm.
more you can not react and add to it, the
Hmm.
better,
Oh yeah.
the
Hmm.
better.
Hmm.
And just reminding yourself, but even if you do, it's really, coming back to bridge. I
Hmm.
know I lost my
Hmm.
temper in that moment. I want you to know I love you no matter what. and that's maybe something to kind of wrap up around, is this idea of
Of
nothing ever
bridging.
coming between, the bridging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing will ever come between us. I'm always going to be here for you. Um, and what can you do every single day to make the relationship a priority? So not just showing loyalty, trying to get, the loyalty to land in the crisis moments, but what can you do to get ahead of it? Hey, I made your lunch for you today.
Mm-hmm.
I knew you
Mm-hmm.
were, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I knew you were going to need this, so I have it ready for you. Showing up 5 minutes early unexpectedly. For like me, I'm always running late. What is something that you can do in these small ways where you're showing that you're making your relationship to them a priority? And, this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we need to assume the responsibility to preserve that sense of connection.
Uh-huh. 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 Yes, we're the one who has the awareness and is responsible.
Right. We, in theory,
Mm-hmm.
are the mature ones.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Mm-hmm.
children are not.
Right.
And trust me, even your 20-year-olds, if I look back on myself and my estrangement from my parents, I was incredibly immature
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
my early 20s. Incredibly.
Okay. You did mention bridging, so it might benefit the audience to just have a real explicit definition of what that is.
Yes. So if,
Okay.
let's say you have a conflict with your child, you get in a huge argument, bridging is this idea, that's in the negative sense. So we could also talk about it even when there's not a conflict, but definitely, let's say you lose your temper, you know, you get in a fight. You want to always be bridging what could divide. And that, coming in later, don't worry, we're going to get through this. I'm always going to be there for you.
Mm-hmm.
Conveying the sense, not just in words, words are part of it, but it's that showing up confident in this. We get into that sort of idea of the alpha.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
warm, I am caring, I've got this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I am always going to be here for you, no matter what.
Okay.
Nothing can come between.
Nothing can come between. And it's just kind of reminding them of that when it might feel like there's a break,
Yes.
that they need that to feel secure. They need the alpha or the mature one to to do the bridging.
Yep,
That is on us. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And maybe just a quick story. Not too long ago, I took, a course that was centered around adolescence through the
Mm-hmm.
Neufeld Institute. And I appreciated a story that Dr. Neufeld told. And it was a story of how he lost both of his teenage daughters, sort of in his earlier stages of doing this work. He was living it with his own family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
how he, his approach, they became very peer oriented, wanted nothing to do with him.
Hmm.
So he took them each separately, at different times,
Mm-hmm.
when things had divided, things had come between their relationship. They were
Mm.
totally, seeking their attachment needs from their peers, rejecting him. He took them on like a weekend camping trip. So his daughter, he talked about how the beginning of the camping trip, his daughter would not make eye contact. She wouldn't touch him. She walked like, 10 feet behind him the entire way up, to wherever they're camping. And, by the end of the trip, softened and held on to him walking over logs, made eye contact. They were laughing and joking, that he didn't give the details of what transpired, but the idea is that she went from that total polarization, pushing him away, to again kind of softening, coming to rest in that relationship, and depending on him again.
That's what
and
I'm hearing. Okay. He
and
he created
right, the
an
condition,
analogy, yes, or a condition,
yeah,
yes, where
of
that
dependence,
needed to be of dependence.
yeah,
Interesting. How
yeah.
do you know how
So
old?
he didn't say, but
Okay.
teenage, teenage years. So the key point that I want to make here with that story to sort of start to wrap up with is that when they got to the bottom of the hike and they're going back home, she turned to him and she said, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cry. It's so emotional.
Yeah.
She said, "Why did you ever leave me?"
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And he's thinking, I never left you. You
Hmm.
left me. That's not what they feel.
Right. Yeah.
They need to know that we have not left them.
Yeah. And that is so challenging through these adolescent years, especially right now with how hard it seems they're pushing us away,
Yes.
you know. So, kind of as we are wrapping up, what do we want to communicate to listeners about what to do with this information? You know, one thing they need to know is we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to bridge. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Totally. Totally.
Yes. And mostly maybe just notice what's coming up. Is that what you would
Yeah.
say?
I think
Yeah.
so.
That they
And
don't
in
really
his
need to take
story,
any action right now.
yeah.
It's just
No, no, no,
no
no action.
action.
No action.
Some
We'll be back.
grace with yourself.
Grace. Oh, and that's the
Hmm.
entire fourth layer is all about grace. So I
Mm.
can't wait to get there when we get there.
Okay.
But I'm
Yeah.
glad we didn't today. I think it deserves more time.
Okay. Awesome.
Mhm,
All right.
mhm.
Um, any anything else besides just noticing what's coming up?
As we wrap up here, I think the main thing for listeners to know is that we're going to continue these conversations. It's sort of this idea of um, one drop from the ocean, trying to distill, just an expansive ocean of ideas and insights and thoughts and into, a drop. And so I hope that what we have been able to talk through today, offered some value and some fresh terrain for reflection.
Maybe
And
some aha moments.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And if you felt your heart, I know for me, I came to tears a couple times as we spoke to, excuse me, today. Um, and that is a part of this journey for us,
Hmm.
finding the softness
Hmm.
and our own tears. And so we will be back. We're going to continue the conversation and talk about this next three stages. We got to the first three.
Hmm.
There's more to come. And yeah, just notice what's coming up for you. We will be back. And my go-to is always if I know I need to find my tears and I can't go direct because I'm way too sensitive and defended against it.
Hmm.
Often it's through these stories, telling
Hmm.
my own pieces of my story, and also um, sometimes turning on some music.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the last episode. Like like find something that will bring up those tears for you, even if it's
Yeah.
a sad movie or something to help you have that up and out, that release. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something I find myself saying often is just hang in there, mama.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hang in there.
Thank you for listening. We hope you take something of value from our conversation today. Please check out the show notes for additional resources, including a prompt for reflection. We welcome your feedback in the comments and hope you join us for the next episode of Attachment Matters.